right, hello everybody, and welcome to the first part of my lesson on subordination in clause structure. The second part will be posted in another video. I've just split it up into two parts because I ran out of space and would like to keep the videos reasonable length. All right, so when we talk about subordination, we are talking about clauses that have clauses inside of them. So for example, in the sentence, Boyo thinks that shoelaces are toys. We have not one but two clauses going on here, right? We have this clause, which shoelaces are toys, is a well-formed sentence in and of itself. And then we have this whole thing, Boyo thinks that shoelaces are toys. This whole clause, which is the whole sentence, is called the matrix clause, and the verb of that clause is called the matrix verb. This is the matrix subject, this is the matrix object, so on and so forth. And then the clause that's inside another is called a subordinate clause. Now, there are different ways and different types of subordinate clauses that you can have. Some things, including the reading that I've assigned for this week, will tell you that the matrix clause is only this portion. That is an old-fashioned way of describing things, and you will see that in some of your in some things that you will read in linguistics, that this is the matrix clause just by itself. The way that we think about syntactic structure now makes that impossible to talk about that as separate from the whole sentence. So when I talk about this, the whole sentence is the matrix clause, and this is the matrix verb of that clause. All right, so now that we know what we mean by subordinate clause and matrix clause, we are going to talk about in this video we'll talk about two different types of subordinate clauses. The first is the complement clause. This is probably the most common type of subordinate clause that you think of, at least when you're talking about subordination. A complement clause is a clause that serves as an argument of the matrix verb. So if we look at our example sentence up here, Boyo thinks that shoelaces are toys, we cannot say just by itself, Boyo thinks, right? I mean, you can, but it would mean something different, right? It's like Boyo sitting there thinking about things, right? But Boyo thinks by itself is not a well-formed sentence, which means that this is an argument of Boyo thinks, right? So the subordinate clause is an argument of the matrix verb. There are a couple different types of complement clauses. So first there is a subject complement. This is where the complement clause serves as the subject of the matrix verb. So for example, that shoelaces aren't toys annoys Boyo. A lot of times you'll see in English we don't use this construction. Instead we would say it annoys Boyo that shoelaces aren't toys. You're allowed to do this in English. You're not allowed to do that in every language. But that shoelaces aren't toys annoys Boyo is a subject complement. An object complement is something like this, where the complement clause is the object of the matrix verb. You may have heard of complementizers before. This is where we get that word complementizer that means this that at the beginning of a clause, right? This is a complementizer that. This is different than that shoelace isn't a toy, right? So if you say that shoelace isn't a toy, that is modifying shoelace and nothing else, right? In this case, it's beginning a complement clause, and hence it is called a complementizer. That shoelaces aren't toys annoys Boyo. Okay. Now there's a sort of a division here because finite and non-finite complements can be either subject or object complements as well. So these two are mutually exclusive. These two are mutually exclusive. You can be this and this, this and this, this and this, this and this, right? So that's why I've separated them out. So a finite complement is simply a complement clause where the verb in that complement clause is tensed. So for example, Boyo likes when he plays with shoelaces, right? So plays is in the present tense. He plays with shoelaces is a perfectly well-formed sentence all by itself. A non-finite complement is something where the verb in the complement clause does not have tense. And there's a couple of different types of these clauses. So Boyo likes to play with shoelaces. This is just a non-finite complement clause. This is the most typical type of non-finite complement clause. There's also participial ones. Belle watches Boyo playing with laces, right? This is using a participle. And then there's Belle watches Boyo's playing with laces. And this is a noun phrase complement clause, right? So this is, technically this whole thing is just a noun. Boyo's playing with laces. But it's formed using verbal structure that is then nominalized. So this is a little bit different. What's important is that in none of these cases does the verb have tense. And you can test that by trying to say these sentences by themselves, right? To play with shoelaces is not okay by itself. Boyo playing with laces is not okay by itself. Boyo's playing with laces. That feels a little more comfortable to stand on its own, but it's not a sentence, it's a noun, right? So finite complements can definitely stand on their own. Non-finite complements cannot. Now remember, when I say finite complements can stand on their own, I'm not saying that the matrix sentence can stand without the complement, right? So Boyo likes is still bad by itself, right? But he plays with shoelaces is fine by itself, so it's a finite complement clause. All right, so this is complement clauses that serve as arguments of the matrix verb. Here are some more types of complement clauses. The adverbial clause. So this is a clause that serves as an adjunct of the main verb, right? So we're still modifying being happy, but when he plays outside is not necessary for the sentence to be grammatical, right? So Boyo is happy is just fine by itself. Then we add this clause and it modifies the being happy, right? So Boyo is happy when he plays outside. When he plays outside is an adverbial clause. Now here are 10 zillion types of adverbial clauses. I'm not going to go give you an example of each of these, but you can read about them in the book. All right, so there are two sort of divisions, though, within these. There are time adverbials, locative clauses, and manner clauses. These can all be replaced with single words in general in most languages. So this would be an example like, Boyo is happy when he plays outside. You can replace that whole when he plays outside with then, right? Boyo is happy then, or Boyo is happy now, or whatever it is, right? Locative clauses tell you where something is happening. Boyo is happy Boyo is happy, I don't know, I can't give you a great example, but locative clauses tell you where it's happening. Manner clauses tell you how it's happening. Sometimes these can sort of blend into each other. For example, Boyo is happy when he plays outside. It's sort of telling you about the manner in which he plays in which he is, right? So they sort of blend into each other, but they can all be replaced with single words. And then there are clauses that can't be replaced with single words. So a reason clause provides the motivation behind the main verb happening. A purpose clause tells you why the main verb is happening. The circumstantial tells you what led to that happening. A simultaneous tells you at the same time as this other thing was happening. A conditional, which is a really important type of adjunct clause, which we may talk about a little bit more, provides you with some sort of it only happens when this other thing happens clause. So this would be like, Boyo is happy if he plays outside, right? Then it would be a conditional, right? So this doesn't happen if this doesn't happen, right? A concessive tells you, is sort of like an I'm sorry clause, because it's giving an excuse or something. A substitutive says, instead of doing this, this happened, right? So Boyo was happy instead of being sad would be a substitutive. And an additive just tells you something else that happened, right? So Boyo was happy and he was sad, right? So these are our first two types of subordination. I will make another video, part 2, where I will talk about some more types. Thanks.